Now this is a simple little recipe using what's often described as one of the meatier vegetables, which is cauliflower. And I've cut it into, what I'm going to be cooking here is some cauliflower steaks. And I'm going to be adding protein in using both cashew nuts and edamame beans. They're a kind of a young, fresh soybean. You buy these frozen in any good Asian shop. They're fairly easily obtained. And I'm going to just finish that with a kind of a sun-dried tomato and roast red pepper, a nice smoky kind of salsa to give that kind of nice grilly kind of taste to the whole dish. So what we're going to need for this is I've used half a cauliflower. Now you could make more portions. This would do about one and a half kind of good portions. But you could use the entire cauliflower yourself. It just depends how much you actually want to make. I'm using about 100 grams of roast red peppers. These are the pre-bought roasted red peppers. Again, very easily obtained. I'm using 70 grams of sun-dried tomato in olive oil. And I'm using the oil from the tomatoes as well, so the equivalent amount. I've got 2 cloves of garlic, a generous teaspoon of smoked paprika, and then I'm going to also use 50 grams of unsalted cashew nuts. I have 120 grams of thawed out edamame beans, which are the baby soybean, and again, very high in protein. I have 140 grams of fresh tomato, and I'm using cherry tomatoes, but that doesn't really matter, just as long as they're nice and ripe and flavorful. I'm going to use about 20 ml of good olive oil, and then just for cooking the cauliflower, I'm going to use a bit of coconut oil, and then just salt and pepper to season. Now the first thing I'm going to do with this recipe is I'm going to make my salsa, or my sauce if you like it. I'm just calling it a salsa, but I'm using that term loosely. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop my fresh tomatoes into a food processor. Use a food processor again, not a food liquidizer, because you do want a bit of texture in this. Pinch of salt, the tomatoes in the oil, about 20 ml of olive oil, the roasted peppers, 2 cloves of garlic, missed, and the smoked paprika. Also going to put a little bit of black pepper in there. Not too much. And I'm going to just blend that down into a nice pesto-y kind of salsa-y kind of texture. Now I've just decanted that into a bowl, and there we have it. Or kind of, I suppose you'd best describe this more as a kind of a red pesto, that kind of a texture. And we're going to be using that a little bit later. So that's that prepared. And I'm just going to put that aside. And the next job I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my cauliflower and I'm going to lightly brush it. I've melted down some of the coconut oil and I'm going to brush the cauliflower with it. It just saves me having to use an excess amount of oil and things like that, and keeps the pan from getting over oily. And especially I'm going to use a grill pan on this as well to cook. So I'm just going to brush both sides, kind of treat it almost like I might a steak. I'm going to brush it nice and liberally. Now, if you didn't have coconut oil, you could use olive oil, but the one, again, I'd always try to avoid due to inflammation is the seed oils, in particular, because they tend to be, again, quite high in omega-6, which is quite a pro-inflammatory oil. So the sunflower seeds, the rape seeds, things like that. So I just put a nice thin layer of coconut oil on my cauliflower. Then I'm going to give them a light seasoning with some salt. And pop on a little piece of black pepper. Almost treating them like I might a steak. And I'm going to just doing that on both sides. The reason I use the coconut oil is because it's just going to allow those flavourings to stick a little bit better as well. So there we have it. Cauliflower ready for the pan. Now I'm going to cook these on a griddle pan, the cauliflower itself. So what I'm going to do is just simply take my cauliflower. I've preheated my pan till it's good and hot. And I'm going to take the flattest surface of the cauliflower and pop it down on the pans. And I want to get these almost charry, getting a nice kind of a grill mark if I can on them, and allowing them to cook. Now a good way of doing these, which I'm going to do as well as I'm finishing the sauce, is I'm going to finish them under the grill itself, and that should allow the cauliflower to tenderize through. Now this will take a few minutes to cook, but as you can see they're just starting to cook, and treat them very much like you might a steak, only for you do want to get them nice and tender and a little bit of a nice kind of char on them as well. And as you can see, by just brushing on the coconut milk, or the coconut oil I should say, just allows you to use the perfect amount of oil. It's not all over the pan and they cook away nice and evenly then. Another thing as these are cooking, now it's just after getting to a nice cooking temperature, when your pan is hot, then reduce your heat a little bit, but do sustain the heat as well, if you see what I mean. So kind of a moderate heat, keep it on. If it's too hot, just turn it down. Another thing is try, if you're using one of these grill pans in particular, you want to try get that nice grill mark on your cauliflower that the pan will give. So don't move your cauliflower, just leave it cook away on that good high heat, and allow the grill marks kind of form on the cauliflower itself. Again, just as if you were cooking a steak. Another thing you can do is just, as they're cooking with a slice, without moving the cauliflower, just press them onto the grill mark, onto the grill pan as well. And that just helps to, again, sear, it'll speed up the cookery a little bit as well, but again, it'll help just to sear the grill marks onto the cauliflower as well. Now I'm just going to pop these onto another gas flame, allowing them to cook away nice and evenly. And I'm going to prepare my little sauce. So I'm just going to pop up the heat again on this other pan. And into that pan, I'm going to add my cashew nuts. Into a dry pan, because I just want to get a nice little bit of a toasting on them. So that will just take a couple of minutes there for that pan to get up to temperature. So, the cashews have just been toasting there for a couple of seconds, or about a minute. A nice hot dry pan. And then I'm going to add in my edamame beans, just to warm them through. Now this is bringing the protein into the dish. So I'm just warming these, and my cauliflower is just cooking in the background here as well. So I'm just going to, as they're just warming, I'm just going to bring my cauliflower back into scene here. And as you can see, that's just getting nice and kind of charry and coloured on one side. So I'm going to just flick these over. As you can see, we're getting a nice grill mark on them, nice colour. Be quite careful because you do want to hold them together in a steak, if at all possible. I'm just going to continue cauliflower cooking on the other side then. There we are. You can see they're just kind of warming up really nicely now. So, as the cauliflower is then cooking away on that side, I just have my cashew here then. And into that, the pesto we made earlier. I'm going to just spoon into that mixture. And I do have a bit of surplus, and this can be used for lots of things, even for a dip or with crudities or so on, and it'll store for a couple of days. So if you have a little bit too much of it, and I have enough here if you want to use the entire cauliflower and just make it a little bit more in the portions. So that's our sauce, pretty much finished for the cauliflower. And we'll be spooning that over it when it's cooked, and you'll get a lovely fragrance of this as well. And again, that's just bringing the protein into the dish. So I'm just going to put that aside for a minute and wait for the cauliflower to cook. That can be just held aside, and then the cauliflower just back on the heat there. And I never actually took it, just transferred it onto another gas flame. And as you can see, that's just cooking away nicely there itself. Just show you how it looks. Again, you don't want to cook it too thick so the pan can handle it and cook it nicely. If you find your pan is a little bit on the hot side, just reduce the heat, but don't take it off the heat. And you'll be able to feel yourself as the cauliflower starts to become nice and tender. And at this stage, be quite careful when you're turning it over. You're flicking it over again. Actually, we need to turn that one. And then just using a small little knife, you'll be able to just probe the cauliflower and tell quite quickly how well it's cooking. So that's the cauliflower. Just nice and tender. I was able to just check that, and you'll be able to check the density of it, if you like, with a nice knife, with a simple little office knife. And I've just turned that off the heat, and the cauliflower has it develops a lovely kind of charry kind of taste to it. Now I'm just going to very simply, over each cauliflower, spoon my cashew nuts, and of course you could do this on a plate or just serve it in the pan as is. And you can just spoon them over the cauliflower, and that is pretty much it, ready to serve. Getting that nice charriness and the taste throughout the entire dish. And that is our cauliflower steaks with our edamame beans, cashews, and that nice roast red pepper, sun-dried tomato salsa.